So, welcome to another episode of the No Bullshit Show. We're going to be talking today about, fuck it. Welcome to another episode of the No Bullshit Show. Today, we're going to be talking about storytelling and its importance in getting your presentation skills better and becoming a marketing executive or just any executive. There's a lot of, talk and mumbo jumbo about storytelling. Very little quantitative facts around it all, but there's a certain element of EQ and its importance in just running teams and delegating and all that kind of stuff. I come from more of a factual background. Atsushi is a very avid proponent or advocate for storytelling. You've used it.
Communication skills.
Communication skills.
I would broaden it to extend beyond just storytelling, although it's a critical component.
Yep.
But I would say communications overall.
Yeah.
Your ability. It's the art of rhetoric.
Yeah.
And not to go off on that,
yeah.
but it is an ancient art. Yeah. Aristotle was the guy that created or who kind of came up with the concept around the art of rhetoric or the art of persuasion.
Yeah. And you coming from, being an executive for multiple firms, you've used this to your own advantage. You've seen it work in the companies you work for, the teams that you've worked with. Today's video is almost like him trying to convince me that storytelling is a thing, because I'm such a factual guy. I'm such a tech nerd. So it's gonna be a little different. It's gonna be an interesting little conversation going on here. So tell me so communication, hands down, people got to be able to communicate and translate, things and semantics and all that kind of stuff. But how has storytelling and communication, or storytelling within communication, helped you become a better executive, manager, just overall person?
A good guy.
I'm feeling good today, so I'm being nice to you. I'm probably not going to cuss as much in this video.
Perfect. Excellent. It's the backbone of everything. Like, you can have the greatest idea in the world, but if you can't communicate it, it's lost, right? Like, you've heard people say, and a good idea is a dime a dozen. It's all in the execution. But if you can't, you have to get everybody rowing in the same direction. And how do you do that? How do you motivate people? You don't do it through facts and say, hey, we have to deliver X, Y, Z by 5 o'clock. That's not motivating. So there's this element that's created, or gets this whole kind of biochemistry that happens when you convey information through storytelling. It's actually, like, if you study, and I'm not a biochemist or, even close, but in my research, it's been proven that the brain actually activates differently when it hears it, when it responds to facts versus stories, when there's that emotional connection. It's actually the presenter's emotions and how it activates his brain or her brain. It gets replicated in the audience of whoever is listening to the same story. So you're automatically creating this emotional connection with your audience. So, when you state facts, it's just processing, right? Whereas when you present the same facts through stories or through that kind of connection, it actually creates this kind of little bookmark in your brain to make it easier for you to recall that information. So, that's kind of I would say the fundamentals as to why communications or specifically storytelling makes sense or is effective. But come on, as you progress in your career, your ability to communicate becomes more paramount. It really, really does. And so it becomes less about, the technical skills you have and kind of those, the skill sets, but rather your ability to motivate a team, your ability to kind of convey concepts, your ability to influence customers.
I think one of the biggest things when it comes to the subcategory of communication, you have storytelling. I think another big category is translating, especially in the tech world. Okay. So, for example, every time you hear when the next iPhone comes out or whatever it may be, they could choose to talk about it at the conference about all the little nitty gritty technical details. But, back in the day of Steve Jobs, when he came out, he was an exceptional translator and storyteller because he would take all the really nitty gritty technical, like, we soldered this and, the processing power of this and blah, blah. He never really talked about that. He talked about what the vision was and what the applications of the phone are and why he's innovating the way that he's innovating. And he's really good at it. Even when I saw an interview on Robert Herjavec, like the guy is in the cybersecurity space, right? I don't even know a lot about the semantics and the terminology they use in the cybersecurity space. But Robert, in interviews, he never talks about those details, let alone, he probably knows about them to a certain degree, but he's really good at translating it to just real world, like why you need it and, relevance and relating it, make it relatable to a business owner on, we do enterprise cybersecurity, it could be as small as, the webcams on your thing, it's a pretty big deal, blah, blah, blah. But I think that's a huge element in all of it. But there's also a scientific element where there's neurological research and neuroscientific research on, and a lot of people would argue with me on this, but it's proven to be true. There's papers out there that explain every time you make a large sale, that large sale, as soon as someone says yes or gives you the green light, it's actually an emotional response. It's never a logical response.
Yep.
So what they like to categorize it in, and shout out to Sharka of Neural Impact over in Vancouver. She's the one who explained this to me. Because she's a professor of neuroscience, and she explained this. People are categorized, like in the corporate hierarchy, people are categorized into how people, why people, and what people. So the what people are typically the guys who ask like, okay, what technologies are we going to use, blah, blah, blah. They're mostly like the computer science geeks and tech geeks. You have the how people, which are like, okay, how is this going to be done? Like how are all these technologies going to integrate? They're typically the managers of the world. And then the why people are the people who ask why on like, why is the revenue this way and so on. And they're the people in the executive role. They're the ones who are signing checks and decision makers. Yep. And for them, the why people, they're so into emotional responses and being able to communicate and translate and being able to say like, okay, tell me the story behind it all.
Sure.
Communicate this and translate it properly to me to make it more relatable to my business and so on and so forth.
To me, the biggest lesson over the last number of years I've learned is in terms of managing projects and managing teams, is that for the client, they often, for the most part, don't care about the solution itself. They don't care about the technical architecture. They don't care about the data models. What they care about is, what's in it for me, and what business value am I going to get from this project, from this investment that I'm making? So, if you go in and, do a status meeting or a quarterly business review and so on, and you stick to your facts, it's not going to resonate. It's not going to align to what the audience is seeking. They're seeking information to say, yes, this was the right decision for me to invest X amount of money into this project because I'm going to get the value for my business that I want. So it's, for the most part, it's less about the details and more about why the details matter and where we are in terms of the alignment to their vision of what they're trying to get out of the project itself. For me, that's a huge learning, is that you can sit there and prepare your presentation decks and talk about all the hours you've used or the percent complete on your tasks and so on. Honestly, for the stakeholder at a client side, it matters less than this is where we are and this is what you're going to be able to achieve once we get this project completed. To me, that's really what you want to continue to align to as you're having these communications and having these conversations with your clients.
Yeah, and as you grow in like any career, if you're a freelancer or even if you're an entrepreneur where you're trying to grow in the hierarchy, there's the higher you get up in the rankings, you're almost further away from the granularity of the facts and the data, because what ends up happening, and this happens to me sometimes, a lot of times, where I'd be so into the data and trying to build a story around it that I almost get lost into this black hole of I'm getting myself deeper and deeper and deeper into it, where you get deep enough and it's like then you all of a sudden hit gold and you're just like, what I don't know how to process this, or I don't know. There's so many different answers that can come out of, and it just, you get into this deep dark hole.
Yeah.
Whereas as like an executive or as a manager, and if you have a team to actually delegate things out, you get to a point where, okay, I have a team to manage that. I have to deal with bigger and better things, and it's almost like you have to filter out some of that stuff.
Well, if you have a team, then your role and responsibility is to remove the impediments from your team, but also to motivate them and get them aligned to kind of make sure they stay on task to get the job completed successfully. So it's less about your ability to roll up your sleeves and write code. It's more about now having to manage a team of folks that are writing code, making sure they're writing the right code, making sure they're, following the right best practices, QA, QC, and all of those things. So it's less about your ability to write code, but it's more about your ability to to manage a group of folks that are kind of at that kind of frontline level, right?
And the ultimate way to manage those folks is through a level of communication.
Yeah.
There's also that element of like how you communicate to them, right? It's like you gotta, I think maybe the top 3 key things are, making sure that your employees are happy, or your teams are happy, your team is happy, making sure that they're being compensated correctly, and ensuring that, even when you're saying, follow this certain nomenclature of, coding or programming, how do you communicate that without sounding like you're commanding?
I think, again, we can inject and weave in the whole concept around telling stories, is because if I were tasked to perform a specific activity, and that's all I was told, you need to do X, okay, I could do it, I guess. But if I'm told you got to do X, and here's the reasons why, and here's the why it's important, then it provides a greater level of context. So all of a sudden, I can understand and appreciate why what I'm doing matters. And I think that's really a big part of what we get satisfaction in our job, is really, doing something that matters, doing something that's going to make a difference, whether it's internally or externally. But that now extends beyond just fact-based. It's really about creating that emotional connection once again. Mm-hmm. I mean, the biggest trend right now, and the biggest buzzy trend words, is AI. And there's going to be, 800 million jobs are going to disappear by 2030 because of machine language learning, natural linguistic processing, and artificial intelligence. So, what are you going to do? What skills does a human possess that's going to differentiate themselves from a machine, a computer, or technology? And I have to tell you, it's the ability to develop a unique thought, or the concept around invention. A machine can't invent, not within the current technology space, not yet, but it can innovate. And the second, and the thing that we're talking about, is your ability as humans, your ability to be empathetic and to kind of communicate through that empathy is not possible by a machine. A machine cannot discern an emotional reaction from somebody. And so if you're going to be successful in your career and to continue to progress, it's going to be dependent on your ability to differentiate yourself from a computer, from a technology. And that's done through your ability to communicate and your ability to kind of convey that emotion, to persuade and to influence.
It's funny because I think it was Mark Cuban who mentioned this, where in 10 to 15 years, and I'm a strong believer in this, like once AI reaches a certain point of, doing things on its own or whatever it may be, in 10 to 15 years, we're going to have a huge, there's going to be a lot of people who lose their jobs, but there's going to be a huge influx in the need for
Different job.
linguistics majors and creatives and people who can, like you said, like tell that story through some form of art or whatever it may be, because that's gonna get completely lost in the world of technology, right? And we're gonna need so much more of that to kind of balance and counteract like the whole yin and yang of this whole innovation technology. And communication skills is a huge thing.
It's no longer a soft skill. It's no longer a soft skill. It's a hard skill for that you need in your toolbox if you're going to be successful in your career.
Yeah.
Like you said, there's going to be millions of jobs lost that exist today.
Yeah.
But there also means that there's millions of jobs that don't exist today are going to kind of surface and bubble up. So, the question is, are you prepared? Yeah. What can you do to make yourself more relevant in that kind of new world, that new paradigm? And to me, my humble opinion is your ability to communicate precisely, concisely, in a way that is going to resonate with your audience. To me, that's a huge skill that you're going to need to be successful.
Yeah, like I've been in situations where, like I've had shit fucking managers. And I've had really phenomenal managers. And it gets to a point where what's funny is now that we're talking about, there is that differentiation between the good managers are the ones who can kind of give me some level of context, whether it be through a story or whatever it may be, on why I should do something a certain way versus the way I currently do it. Versus another manager, usually a crap one, that just tells me do it this way for the sake of doing it that way. But there's that interesting little connection between that story, because a story, like the context is just a story. Right? It's a very short story from my perspective. Like, let's say if someone told me to, build a campaign or use the technology in this certain way, then I would ask them why. Why would I do it? Why would I do it that way? The crap managers can never answer that question. They're just like, just do it that way. Yeah. Whereas,
or they don't give you the courtesy, or they don't think it's needed.
Exactly. Whereas the good managers, or how I try to be sometimes with my contractors, is I try to tell them, like, okay, you should probably do it this way, and if you have a better way, great, figure it out and let me know. But I've made this mistake in the past because of ABC variables. Then I learned to do it this way, and it's helped me gain the ABC benefits by doing it this way, and I give them context into, like, okay, I was at this company, I did this and that and then I realized it's a better way of doing it, and this is like all just being it takes a little bit more time, but there's a certain art and a way of crafting a story to be able to be more relatable to that certain individual. Yeah,
no, I agree. It's the more I've kind of talked about it, the more I'm working with clients regarding their ability to communicate, to present information in a compelling way, the more I'm convinced that there is this gap that exists in terms of people's abilities, business professionals' ability to effectively communicate. And so, I'm investing a lot of time in kind of making sure that I'm kind of working with clients in a way that makes sense, and that I'm providing them with value in terms of what it is that they're trying to drive at. And not just growing a business, but the tools that they'll need, communication skills as one small example, as they kind of progress and grow their business. So it's fascinating. It truly is.
I think a huge thing that I've learned in the past 2 years, with that being said, is because I work with a lot of individuals that are of your age and caliber as my clientele. What I realized is I gotta be able to build that trust in our relationship initially, right? Because the only way they're ever gonna listen to me is if we have that trust, and the only way to build that trust is by developing that emotional connection around, okay, so I could tell you facts all day, but facts are just facts to you, right? And most of them probably not even be relevant to you unless they're high enough level. But I feel the reason why we got along this past year is because we were able to kind of connect at a certain level and be able to do these videos together. I was kind of able to show you the story or the benefit of doing this and the scalability of it all. because
No,
I
I agree.
understood you, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like that's how we got along, and we're able to build that trust in that relationship. And it's such a critical part because, like, it's from my perspective. Don't take this the wrong way. You're almost like a guinea pig to me, right? Being able to like build that relationship, and I've done it with people in the past, but
But and there's a certain chemistry, right? There's a certain connection that you create with like-minded people. I think that's first and foremost.
Yeah.
But there's something to be said for expanding your own and broadening your own kind of knowledge base by talking to people that may not be like-minded, to hear the opposing point of view. And to me, that's how you kind of extend beyond kind of your own kind of silo. And I find it really interesting to talk to people who aren't from the space, who aren't, coming from software, maybe they're on the retail side, maybe they're from the hospitality side, because everybody has different experiences. But to me, the common thread is really about your success is measured by your ability to kind of convey yourself, to kind of communicate the ideas, whether it's good news, bad news, whether it's just facts and so on. Your ability to communicate those things really has a big influence on your ability to kind of, grow and progress professionally. That to me is kind of what I see.
So let me ask you this: when it comes to meeting like-minded individuals, that's great, and I'm a huge proponent of that. But how do you deal with people who are, let's say, closed-minded or not open to your level of your stories or your, like, from my perspective, I kind of just cut them out. Because it almost takes too much effort and too much time trying to convince them or trying to build that relationship with them.
It's an alternative.
Yeah.
It's an option for you to just not work with people like that.
Yeah.
But I think that's being dismissive. I think there's always going to be value. And to be honest, it's really your own reaction, right? Like somebody who presents themselves as standoffish, or that you just feel like there isn't that connection, that's based on your own interpretation, your own reaction to that circumstance. And so in order to kind of change that outcome, you have to change your own reaction, your own kind of point of view to it. And so it's always good practice to find yourself in a circumstance where you said, man, I feel like I'm wasting my time. But if you can kind of change your frame of thinking to say, where is the value? What can I get? What is the value that I can get from this interaction? Because there's tons of lessons that you can gain from every conversation you have. And so if you kind of go into these situations with that mindset, I think you're going to be less resistant to just say, this guy knows nothing, or, he's wasting my time kind of thing, right?
Yeah. I find that probably the most difficult, especially in the marketing space, between that transition of old school traditional marketers versus this whole new realm of modern marketing, and even like this whole other realm of like marketing scientists and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Because there's a huge disparity between the skill sets. There's a huge disparity between what they believe in, what we believe in, and it's almost hard to kind of integrate everyone together. So even some of the CMOs that I talk with, or even some of my prospects, they're so kind of caught up in that old school stuff that when I try to give them, and this is why building that trust and relationship is such a key element in the beginning, and just saying, hey, look, I'm on your side. I'm trying to help your business. I want to help you keep your job, and so on and so forth. I'm not trying to ruin anything.
Yeah.
But I got to build that first. Then I can come in and say.
But how do you do that? That's through, you validate your credentials, you validate your experience. The best way to convey that is through, I'm going to say, it's like a case study or a story.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's why if you can't convince or you can't influence that thinking, then you're kind of stuck, right?
Yeah.
Stuck in that kind of world of being, unless you are encountering somebody who's looking for exactly what you're selling, it's going to be tough to convert.
Yeah.
So this is why it's still very much an art, and it's going to be based on your personality, what you're comfortable with. But it's still this common theme is around your ability to kind of convey your thoughts in a way that's going to align and resonate.
Yeah. And I have to, I in myself is almost a case study in that sense of, I found a lot more success in gaining the trust of whatever prospective CMOs only because I was able to communicate my story properly, or I could communicate, how another company, we tried that same method, and they had this entire thought process, and just were going with it, but it ended up like crashing and burning or whatever it may be. And that's how I can get in on that relationship. Because if I don't build that first, like if you're a CMO I was trying to sell to, you've got to be like, who the fuck is this kid? Or who the hell is this guy, right? And trying to tell me what to do with my business. When, you might have come from a background of working as a CMO for an enterprise for 15 years, right? And you kind of you weren't in the roots of it all and all that kind of stuff. So it's an interesting little space to be in. But I've learned to appreciate communication. I've learned to appreciate storytelling, especially with where I want to be, and like doing less of the work, but being more of a consultant and having people do the work for me.
There's tons of nuance. Like, I mean, we're kind of cruising at about 100,000 feet in terms of communication, storytelling, because there's tons of nuance, right? And you get into the format, whether it's synchronous or asynchronous, what happens if you present to a large group of folks versus a small group, email, telephone conversations, that's all forms of communication. So, and there's nuance within that. And so, but, the big broad stroke is really about, don't underestimate the power and the ability to communicate, right? Talking with customers and clients.
And I think even, just to add a quick little example in there, like look at all these people on YouTube who are vlogging, and let's be real, some of them have nothing to say, but people still watch your stuff because they're vlogging their entire day and they're building that. It's almost like you're being involved in their life of whatever the ups and downs and all you're building that emotional connection with people, and like vlogging is almost a prime example of how storytelling really comes into fruition, because some of these people have like 40-minute long videos and an hour-long videos they post every single day, and it's like most of the stuff in the video is a complete waste of time, but you still watch because it's like you're in their day.
Yeah, it's the community, right?
Yeah,
that's the community that your subscription base is your community. It's your little tribe. They're communicating out. That's not the world I come from. So that's a foreign concept. But to me, my world is about presenting good news, bad news, statistics, data. Data is a big one, right? Like now with this whole kind of theme around, data analytics and so on, the data exists. Now the trick and the challenge is around what's the story? How do you convey the results of this data in a compelling way that makes sense to a business?
Yeah, how do you relate it back to the business? Sure. Yeah.
And that's kind of the gap that I still see, is that people have reams and like terabytes of information and data points. Petabytes. Sure.
Yeah.
But they just spew it out. They just regurgitate it, transform it, and say, here you go, in a nice big, crazy spreadsheet.
Yeah.
As a stakeholder, as a senior stakeholder, I would say, okay, like you're expecting me to what?
Yeah, exactly. I made that mistake. I've made that mistake before where I just like say, okay, here's a fucking spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Right? But when it happens that way, this like people like you, they don't care, right? It's like, okay, how does this relate this to my 3 KPIs or my 5 KPIs that I'm responsible for my team, for my department, for whatever it may be.
Yep.
And then that's when I'm just like, okay, if I really want to build that relationship with you, I need to be able to give you the insights and the story and the context of these particular data points. And if you want to see it, it's there.
Right.
But shouldn't be the forefront.
You can validate it through all of the back end stuff.
Exactly.
You're absolutely correct. If somebody throws up a slide that I can barely read with a bunch of numbers, my eyes will glaze over and I'll just say next slide, because it's not relevant. It's not important to me, because it would take me time to kind of decipher it and kind of get what I would want out of it. So if somebody could kind of preempt that and say, hey, here's the 3 numbers, 3 KPIs, the metrics, here's what it means, here's how we can improve it, here's how we came to be, That's far more interesting than presenting me with reams of data.
Exactly. Right. Rather than numbers, explain to me like, okay, what's the customer flow? Where are we going wrong in that flow? So on and so forth.
Yeah.
So to close off, if you, through your decades of experience, I don't mean to be ripping on you today.
I know, like it's my gray hair.
Through your experience, what would be, I guess, your 3 key takeaways or pieces of advice in terms of like the mistakes you've made or the solutions you've had to storytelling and to communicating that we likely don't know about?
I would say keep it simple. Like I'm a huge fan of, I don't know if it's a fan, but I appreciate the power of words. And so oftentimes I'll go off on the wrong side and be too verbose or use words and use language in a way that is not easy to understand. I get that's my own kind of challenge. And so one of the things that I'm working really hard at is to simplify the concept and to convey it in a language that's easy to understand. People shouldn't have to sit there and say, okay, what does he mean? So that to me is a huge one. I would say don't underestimate the power that you have in telling a compelling story to get your point across. That's probably the second one. And the third one, I would say, this is really kind of apropos for you, Andrew, is that there's something to be said for using the power of language, including curse words, profanity. I would say don't be a trucker in terms of, not to stereotype truckers, but to be throwing F-bombs left, right, and center. But there is an impact. Again, there's a neurological response you get when somebody spouts off profanity. And so, to me, it just kind of bubbles back to your choice of words and your choice, not just your choice of words, but the timing in which you use it can really kind of impact your ability to kind of get your point across.
Yeah. Because, like, if you can use cuss words, not for the sake of using cuss words, but cussing to either really solidify a point that you're absolutely convinced about or you're very passionate about, or even just breaking down that barrier. Because a number of times I would go into a meeting room and a lot of people are proper, but then as soon as you say a cuss word, everyone just shoulders just relax because it's just like, oh man, we should actually cuss in this because everyone cusses. Let's be real.
For me, it's all about the pause that it creates.
Yeah.
It forces somebody it jolts them to take a moment and to kind of process the information that you just conveyed. So if it's important enough and you're looking to command that attention, then throwing an F-bomb, maybe not an F-bomb, I don't know, whatever word that you
whatever works for you.
Yeah. I think that's really the point in which it's going to, I guess, be effective.
Yeah.
But if you're constantly using, and they've done studies where, people use profanity, interspersed based on their frequency, the kind of reaction diminishes if you use it too often, right? And so you lose the effect. But there is definitely something to be said for the kind of the language and your choice of language.
Yeah. So if I were to give 3 pieces of advice, I think my 3 would be, first one, know your audience, or like, you know what, when you go into a room, scan the room a little bit, just figure out who you're really talking to.
Yeah.
Who
you want to talk to.
And who you want to talk to. And the second thing is, be relatable.
Yeah.
In a sense of, don't just spout out a story because if it's not relatable to you, because you won't care, you won't listen.
Sure.
So understand that person as it's almost a caveat of the first one of knowing your audience. Be relatable, and the third one was know your data. Be confident about your data, but don't let it be the forefront of what you're talking about.
Don't lead with it.
Don't lead with it. Exactly. Yeah. It's almost that same analogy of don't be technology led. Be technology enabled. Same thing with data. Don't be data led. Be data enabled.
Yeah.
In a sense of extract what you need to extract out of it. Build some context and some insight around it. But anytime you but let the data build your confidence. This is the reason why in science there's a confidence level and a confidence rating.
Sure.
Because we have the data to back. If there's any question, we can always go back to the data and be convinced that, okay, look, to answer your question, this is what you should be looking at, so on and so forth.
Cool.
Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that episode. It was a little bit more relaxed and a little different from what we usually do. If you have any questions for us, please comment down below. If you have any comments, if you have any criticisms, by all means, go to town in the comments. We'll check them out. And until next time,
Peace.
See you later.